Welcome again to the class on Aristotle's Poetics. We had finished first and second section. Today we begin the third section, which talks about the construction of epic and comparison of epic with tragedy. In chapter 23rd, Aristotle talks about the construction of epic and tragedy because they are similar forms of drama. And since he has examined tragedy in detail, when he comes to epic, we know already that epic has to be put under the umbrella of narrative poetry. Earlier, he had manifested or described two forms of drama or two forms of representation. One was narrative and one was dramatic. So, epic falls under the category of narrative because it narrates in a very magnified language. And although it does not imitate an action like a tragedy, but it can involve some kind of a magnitude in acting. Yet there are some many similarities between both epic poetry and tragedy. And Aristotle says that the construction of an epic should be similar to that of a drama. He says that poetic imitation, which is narrative in form and employs a single meter, as in a tragedy, because in a tragedy the poets imitate and they follow a single meter. Now he says that it should have for a subject a single action, whole and complete. This also he has discussed in the earlier chapters, that it should revolve around an action which should be whole and complete. It should have a beginning, it should have a middle and an end. In overall, it resembles the kind of the structure of a living organism. Now he says that it differs in structure from historical compositions because although historical incidents, they don't present a single action, although they relate to single period, but it can talk about, historical compositions can talk about many people from that certain period, one common period of time, although the events also might or might not be connected together. Now he says this is the practice among the poets, that the kind of attempt that has been done by Homer in presenting the Battle of Troy or the War of Troy in Odyssey, etc., Iliad, he detaches a kind of a single portion. That means he says a single hero, a single period, or a single action indeed, which can have multiple parts. So, a little of it has been discussed in the Iliad, and then he says that the subject of a tragedy provides material for many other tragedies also. So, the kind of construction along fixed dramatic principle is the key mark of a tragedy. Now, the unity in the two epics, since he discusses Homer, he says Homer has been a great writer because in Iliad, he has shown multiple stories, a plurality of stories can be seen. And this feature requires less unity in a drama because they contradict each other. Epic allows for a greater kind of a variety than a tragedy because the story, it should not be very vast, because in epic the story is vast and it can be confusing, but in tragedy it is not so. And he also compares it with history, as we had discussed. So the general laws of unities laid down for epic and tragedy are almost similar as that for a drama. And the drama is more compact, more serialized kind of a whole, and the events presented in the drama are directly related to the development of the character. Now, in the next chapter, he talks about epic and tragedy. He's continuing the discussion of epic from the earlier chapter, and he's comparing both epic and tragedy. Although he says there are very common features between both. because the features or the characteristics of the epic are present in tragedy also. But the poetry, uh, like a tragedy, we have a simple or a complex plot, and the effect is produced by sufferings, etc. Spectacle also is excluded. So he says that epic poetry must have as many kinds of tragedy. It must be simple, it can be complex, ethical, pathetic, etc. So the parts, except with the exception of song and spectacle, only these two parts or elements can be avoided. With these two exceptions, all are same, and it requires a reversal of situation. Recognition also is there, scenes of sufferings are there, and interestingly, the thoughts and diction also of both epic and tragedy are artistic. And Homer, of course, is a good example to see because he has written both. So, Iliad, he says that Aristotle says that Iliad is simple also but pathetic also. Odyssey has a complex plot and it's ethical. So, epic poetry differs from tragedy only in its construction and its meter. Because, as regards the scale or length, there is an adequate limit, but epic poem can be much longer than a tragedy. Tragedy, because it tries to confine to a single revolution of the sun, but epic has no limits. And this difference or this observation, Aristotle says, leads to the concept of unity of time. Aristotle particularly is not laying down any kind of a rules or principles, but he's just making an observation on the basis of the Greek dramatis that he has already discussed and mentioned in his poetics. In general, he says the epic's length, it should be such that it can be taken at one view. But this length, interestingly, gives some advantages to the epic also as compared to tragedy, because those events or incidents which the epic poet is able to relate those events simultaneously taking place at different places. They are related, they are interrelated, and to different persons also. But tragedy, since it is confined only to stage, so it cannot deal with different incidents at the same time. And he it also cannot deal with several sets of persons also. He is also making this with reference to the Greek theater, because it's not possible in the theater to present actions which are taking place simultaneously at different places on the stage, because it's not possible to have a divided stage. And this observation of Aristotle was later called and turned into what we know as the unity of place. Now, he is not laying down any set of principles or rules to be followed rigidly. He's just trying to bring about the differences between the both. And the ability to relate to incidents simultaneously, if it is happening, is one feature which provides the epic a kind of a richness and a grandeur, and also some kind of an interest, because we have many characters, many incidents taking place at one point of time. And these episodes in a tragedy can be handled and taken up very briefly, but in an epic, the poet has the poet has the like capacity to lengthen it to as many length as possible. Sometimes it can also lead to dullness, but then he has, as a great writer, he can manage it beautifully. And in the case of meter also, he says the epic is different from a tragedy, because tragedy can employ different kinds of meter, but the epic only allows for hexameter. It only allows for heroic meter, that is the hexameter, because hexameter or the heroic meter is considered to be the grandest of all. And since it is considered to be the grandest of all, most dignified, it allows for certain strange and rare words. So, this kind of iambic meter, which is used for tragedy, is nearer to some ordinary speech, and it requires the element of wonder, marvelousness to a great extent. Since it allows for improbable or wonderful things, so epic, since we know that it is not enacted in the front of our eyes, but tragedy is, so improbable does not seem very weird or absurd to us in the epic, but it all depends upon the imagination. So, according to Aristotle, he says that in poetry, it has to be presented, if it is to be presented, it needs a proper justice or a justification, since it cannot go against the laws of nature or laws of casuality. And the justification, of course, he says that it has to be presented in a proper amount of a degree. Um, he also says that diction should be elaborated in the pauses of action because there is no expression of character or thought. So, the diction, the art of telling, it should be so convincing that the effect does not produce any kind of a fallacy. Now, in the next chapter, 25th chapter, he discusses about, he's just answering the critics and offering a kind of a defense against what has been the charges which has been levied against him. And this, of course, is a technical kind of a chapter because earlier also we had a chapter on diction. He is analyzing the critical problems, and he says with the critical difficulties and their solutions, he's analyzing those critical difficulties and the objections which have been put forth by critics. um, he begins by talking about the role of an imitator, the painter or the artist, and compares them. Then there he answers them one by one. The first charge that he answers is the charge of impossibility. That impossibilities, if the writer is engaging into certain impossibilities, it can be avoided and it should be avoided because justifiable impossibilities are should have an end to themselves. It should become justified because just because of the sake of grandeur, the writer is cannot take the liberty of using them. Then he says that sometimes the poets are charged with irrationality. Objects are produced that representations of neither kind or how men say the thing is. It can apply to all men and gods both, but the false which is presented in a work of art is believed by men, and accepted belief can be considered false. So this the writer has to keep in mind to create a kind of a balance between rational and irrational. Then the moral correctness also is important because whether the poet, whatever the poet is saying in the poem is morally correct or not, he has to keep in mind, because this is a valid point, that morality considered should be considered and read in the light of a context. So everything is relative, it cannot be read in isolation. So this charge Aristotle answers very beautifully. Then he says incorrectness. Sometimes incorrect events or incorrect incidents are also presented in such a way that they don't seem convincing. Then contradictions, or the passage, if there are contradictions, people don't believe. Sometimes it seems probable and sometimes improbable. So he says that poet cannot be an absurd poet because he has already considered all probable alternatives before discussing them. And since he mentions so many Greek examples in this chapter, so we have to understand and read this chapter in the light of the Greek references or the examples which have been cited by Aristotle, because certain examples are not translated as it is. So we have to understand them in the proper context. The last chapter, which is chapter 26, and which is the comparison between epic and tragedy, he considers the question of this difference between, because he says tragedy, according to critics, it is considered as a vulgar form of art and less cultivated, because epic is more popular, more cultivated, and more magnified. So Aristotle gives an answers to all those criticism levied against tragedy. He says the poet who writes a drama, even in an epic, when he recites those events, he can overdo them. He can be exaggerating them or overdoing them. And some kind of movements of spectacle, dance, etc., which are not exactly possible for the writer to convey them on the stage, again creates a problem for the writer of a tragedy. Tragedy, according to Aristotle, is of course superior to epic poetry, because he says superior it is because it has all the epic elements. It may even use the epic meter with the music and spectacular effects as important accessories, and also produce vivid of pleasure. It is placed on a higher level by Aristotle is because tragedy has all the elements which are present in the epic. It has a serious subject matter, it has serious plot, diction, thought, characters. Only the two elements, spectacle and melody, are avoided, but then all the major elements are included. So, epic is in a narrative form. We all know that tragedy is in a dramatic form, but this does not actually mean that narrative cannot be performed and enacted on the stage. He further gives the argument that there is a greater amount of concentration in a tragedy, because the concentration is due to the magnified or dignified stage effects. Although epic is of a greater length and it allows a more variety because many events are happening at the same time, but the pleasure which is depicted in a tragedy are so concentrated that it gives a kind of a um, unity also, and the kind of an effect which a plurality of action or multiple of actions can create.